The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus departed to the mountain to pray, and he spent the night in prayer to God. When day came, he called his disciples to himself, and from them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles: Simon, whom he named Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Simon who was called a zealot, and Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. And he came down with them and stood on a stretch of level ground. A great crowd of his disciples and a large number of the people from all of Judea and Jerusalem and the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And even those who were tormented by unclean spirits were cured. Everyone in the crowd sought to touch him, because power came forth from him, and he healed them. The Gospel of the Lord. I always find it a bit interesting that Jesus prayed. I mean, he's God, so it just seems a little redundant. Not necessarily, but that pops into my mind, right? So here he spends the whole night in prayer, kind of like trying to discern who the 12 apostles are going to be. And I'm like, well, doesn't he know it? I mean, he's God. So I always get a little bit hung up there. It's not a big problem, but it strikes me, you know. And St. Paul affirms this in the first letter. He says, in him, in the first letter to the Colossians that we just read, our first reading, he says, in him the fullness of deity resides. The fullness of God, the Godhead, resides in Jesus. So there is truth in my dilemma. But also Jesus is fully man. And this is what we call the hypostatic union. And it's baseline Christianity. It really is a dogma of the Christian faith. That Jesus is fully God and fully man in one person. Okay, he contains both natures in one person. We can distinguish the two, but we can't divide them. Jesus is fully God and fully man. And it is a mystery involved there, because how does he express that deity within his humanity? And is it limited or not? I mean, it's a mystery. But Jesus does take time to pray, and he needs to. In his humanity, he needs to talk to the Father. And I don't know what that exactly looked like, but in that he was able to, discern or know who the disciples were to be, and he named them. But then I think that kind of the interesting here at the end of this gospel, how he names the apostles, all right? And then it says, he came down with them and stood on them a stretch of level ground. And I just feel like that there's something there. It's that Jesus, in his humanity, is able to level with us. Like God is now able to speak to us on the same plane, on a level playing field. Like that's the beauty of the incarnation, that God took on our flesh, and now we can relate to him. All right, so Jesus, he does show us how to do things. So, there is an example he sets for us by going to pray to God, the Father, whether it's to discern things or just communion with him. Jesus sets that example. But it's also in his humanity, in his sacred humanity, of which the fullness of deity resides in one person, that we're able to relate to this guy. He's not some distant figure, and he's also not just one of the boys. He's both and in one person, Jesus. All right, it's beautiful. It's a mystery, but that's how we're able to relate to him. That's why people are attracted to him, because he's a man, and he can relate with a real high knowledge of things, which makes sense because he's God, and that's what he draws him to. So there's a lot going on here, and Jesus is he's a mystery incarnate, not one that we can't touch, but one that we can relate to. He's fully God, fully man in one person. It's the hypostatic union. It's the central mystery to our faith, the incarnation. God took on our flesh in order that we could relate to him in order that Jesus could save us and lead us back to God the Father.